Good morning, everyone. Hello. Hello.
Good morning, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Good morning, ma'am.
How are you all doing? Fine, huh? Safe at home?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
So today we are discussing other topic of embryology. So last week I had discussed about the last week the 2 days back only we had discussed about one extra embryonic membrane or the fetal membrane called as the placenta. So today we are discussing other fetal membranes, the knowledge of which is very important in performing some prenatal diagnostic procedures. So today we are discussing about the fetal membranes and one of the interesting topics, that is the twinning. Okay. So the other day only I had told what are fetal membranes or the extraembryonic membranes. So these are the membranous structures which are derived from the zygote, but they do not form any part of the embryo proper. So when the embryo is developing, parallelly these also will develop. But what happens is these will be shed later after the delivery of the fetus as after birth. So all this membrane will be expelled as after birth. So why they are appearing? So when they are expelled, why they should appear? So these will they are responsible for the protection, respiration, excretion and nutrition of the embryo. Like the placenta we have discussed. So many functions are attributed to the placenta. Similarly, the other extra embryonic membranes also play important role. So that's why the knowledge of this is very important. So other thing what I discussed was the knowledge of this is important because they help in performing some prenatal diagnostic procedures. You might have heard like amniocentesis and chorionic villi biopsy very frequently done between 13th to 15th week of development to detect some chromosomal anomalies or genetic disorders in the fetus. That's why the knowledge of these extra embryonic membranes is very important. So what are these membranes? The membranes are namely the amnion, the yolk sac, the allantois, the chorion, the placenta and the umbilical cord. So these are all the extraembryonic membranes which are seen in the human beings. So the placenta, the chorion we had discussed last week. So chorion I have told. So what is chorion? What are chorionic villi? So those things will not discuss again today. So we'll discuss the other extraembryonic membranes today. So first we'll discuss about the amnion, then we'll discuss the other things. So what is amnion? Can anyone tell what is amnion? What is amnion? So chorion we have told it is the extraembryonic mesoderm with the trophoblast is called as the chorion. So what is amnion? Anyone knows? Which was taken in the previous classes? Don't know? Okay, so the amnion is a thin extraembryonic membrane. So what it is a thin extraembryonic membrane that loosely envelops the embryo, forming a sac which is called as amniotic sac. And what is this sac contains? This sac contains the amniotic fluid. So this sac is lined by the ectodermal cells of the inner cell mass and the amniogenic cells of the trophoblast. So as the amniotic sac enlarges during the later part of the pregnancy due to collection of the amniotic fluid, so the amnion gradually surrounds the whole embryo and it ensheaths the developing umbilical cord as well. So it is a sac which is lined by the ectodermal cells and the amniogenic cells of the trophoblast. So just a second, give me a break and come back. Okay. Okay. So this is in the early part of the pregnancy. You are seeing the pointer? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
You are seeing the pointer. So this is all
Yes,
the
ma'am.
chorionic cavity or the extraembryonic coelom. So this pink color cavity, what you are seeing, so this is the amniotic cavity, and the yellow color one is the yolk sac, and this is the embryonic disc. Okay, so this you all know already. It has got the ectoderm and the endoderm. So this amniotic cavity, the floor is formed by the ectoderm and roof is formed by the amniogenic cells, flat amniogenic cells. So from where these are derived? So these are derived from the surrounding trophoblast. So whatever trophoblast is there, it will give rise to this amniogenic cells. So these amniogenic cells will line the roof and the lateral walls, but not the floor. So floor is formed by the ectoderm. So this is the amniotic cavity, which is initially small. Later what happens? It enlarges and surrounds the embryo at the expense of the extraembryonic coelom. So this is the extraembryonic coelom or the chorionic cavity. So at the expense of this, the amniotic sac will enlarge and surround the embryo. So this is called as the amniotic cavity or the amniotic sac, which is filled with the amniotic fluid. So what does this amnion constitutes? So this constitutes the the amniogenic cells, that is the flat cells which form the roof and the lateral wall, and the somatopluric layer of the mesoderm. So I hope you all remember. So this extraembryonic mesoderm, with the invasion of or with the formation of the extraembryonic coelom, it is divided into two parts. One is called as the somatopluric mesoderm and the other one is called as the splanchnopluric mesoderm. So this somatopluric mesoderm lines the amniotic cavity and the trophoblast, whereas the splanchnopluric mesoderm lines the yolk sac. So this is the splanchnopluric. This all thing, this is which is lining the amniotic cavity and surrounding the trophoblast. So that will be called as the somatopluric mesoderm. So what is amnion? So the amniogenic cells and the somatopluric mesoderm will together constitute what is called as the amnion. Okay. So chorion is nothing but the extraembryonic mesoderm along with the trophoblast is called as the chorion. Okay. So this is how the amniotic sac will enlarge later. Okay, and it will encircle the embryo and it will also ensheath the umbilical cord. So that's why your umbilical cord is covered by the thin amniotic membrane. So same thing here. So this is the amniotic sac, what you are seeing. So there is obliteration of this chorionic cavity. So because of this only your amniotic sac is able to enlarge. So this is the amniotic sac or the amniotic cavity. So what we have told, the amniotic sac, it contains the amniotic fluid. So what is this amniotic fluid? What is its importance? It is a clear watery fluid which is present within the amniotic sac, and it plays a major role in the development and the growth of the fetus. And what it contains? It mainly contains some salt, sugars, urea and the proteins. So from where this amniotic fluid is derived? Can anyone tell what are the sources of this amniotic fluid? So initially it will be secreted by the amnion. So what we have told, amnion is nothing but the amniogenic cells which are lining the amniotic cavity along the roof and the lateral wall. So initially it is secreted by the amniotic cells. Later that will be taken up by the fetal kidney, very important, the fetal kidney and the fetal lungs. So they will start secreting the amniotic fluid. So initially it is by the amniotic cells, later it is by the fetal respiratory tract, and then it will be by the excretory system, mainly the kidneys, which will contribute to the amniotic formation of the amniotic fluid. So initially the volume is very less, it will go on gradually increasing. So in 10 weeks it is around 30 ml, and in 20 weeks it is around 350 ml, and at the term it will be around 700 to 1000 ml. So that is how the gradually the amniotic fluid goes on increasing. So this is how you can see. So this is the complete amniotic sac, okay, which has enlarged at the expense of the chorionic cavity. So what we have told, the composition. So it is an aqueous solution which is suspended with material. So what it mainly contains, It mainly contains some proteins, hormones, enzymes, pigments, carbohydrate, but the epithelial cells which are sloughed off from the fetus, fetal lung, placenta and the amniotic sac. Whatever the cells are sloughed off, they will be present in the amniotic fluid. And apart from that, very important is the fetal urine. So the hormones present are mainly the HCG and the human placental lactogen, which are present in the amniotic fluid. So this is the composition of the amniotic fluid. So what we have told, the study of this extraembryonic membranes is very important to perform certain prenatal diagnostic procedures. So one of the important procedures you might have heard already from your relatives. So that is called as the amniocentesis. So what is this amniocentesis? It is the aspiration of the fluid from the amniotic cavity or the amniotic sac. So from this sac, the fluid will be aspirated. So that is called as the amniocentesis. So when this will be performed, so it is usually performed at 14th to 15th week of the development. And what is studied here, mainly since it contains the cells of the fetus and the urine of the fetus, so it can detect the fetal proteins, hormones, enzymes, all this, and even the chromosomal anomalies can be detected, and any defective enzymes which is leading to any developmental anomalies in the fetus can also be detected. That's why the amniocentesis is performed to know mainly the chromosomal abnormalities or any defective enzymes, or for the assay of the fetal proteins, hormones, enzymes. And apart from that, even the fetal sex can also be determined by the amniocentesis. So what are the one very important protein which will be detected by amniocentesis is something called as the alpha fetoprotein. So this alpha fetoprotein is high in the neural tube defects and it is low in the chromosomal anomalies like the trisomy. So this is the something called as the amniocentesis. So when it is performed around 14th to 15th week of the development. So that was about the amniocentesis. Then what is the function? So what can anyone tell? What will be the functions of this amniotic cavity? What it helps in? Anyone knows? So this amniotic fluid, it will help in the floating of the embryo and the movements of the embryo also. So this movement of the embryo will help in the musculoskeletal development of the fetus. So the embryo floats and moves freely. Apart from that, it is like giving a water cushioning effect. So it will not experience the jolt what the mother is experiencing, so it is giving a cushioning effect. So whenever mother experiences some jolts, it will not receive those jolts. So that is called as the cushioning effect or the water cushioning effect, and it is acting as a barrier to infection, and very important, it is helping in the symmetrical growth and development of the fetus. And the other thing I already told, because it is moving freely, it will be helping in the musculoskeletal development. Apart from that, the normal fetal lung development, and it is maintaining the homeostasis, that is the controls body temperature, and it is forming the hydrostatic bag, or what is commonly called as the bag of waters, that will help in the dilatation of the cervix during the labor. So that is, these are the main functions which are attributed to the amniotic fluid. So these are all the functions. Then you should know some abnormalities related to the amniotic fluid. So what we have told, amniotic fluid is around 700 to 1000 ml. So whenever there is either quantities less or more, there will be some abnormalities noted, and these will be related to some anomalies in the fetus. So that you have to know. So what is oligohydramnios? Oligohydramnios means, oligo means less. So when there is less amount of the amniotic fluid circulating in the amniotic sac, how less? It is less than 400 ml, then it is told as the oligohydramnios. So what will be the cause? So what we have told, it is mainly secreted by the renal kidneys in the later part of the the fetal kidneys in the later part. So what happens, any renal agenesis of the fetus or any obstructive uropathy in the fetus or in the placental insufficiency because of the reduced blood flow, so all this will lead to the less circulation of the amniotic fluid in the amniotic sac. So these are the causes for the oligohydramnios. So mainly the facial defects and the limb defects. Apart from that, the pulmonary hypoplasia will be noted in such infants, and that is about the oligohydramnios. When the fluid is less than 400 ml, it is called as the oligohydramnios. So similarly, there is polyhydramnios. Poly means it is more. So how much more? It should be more than 2000 ml to tell it as a polyhydramnios. So what are the reasons for this polyhydramnios? So any neural tube defects of the fetus, especially the anencephaly or any esophageal atresia. What happens if there is esophageal atresia? The fetus is not able to swallow the amniotic fluid, so there is no subsequent absorption of this fluid into the fetal GIT. So that will lead to the more amount of the amniotic fluid circulating in the amniotic sac. So that is, these are the main causes or the reasons for the polyhydramnios, and complications are mainly the premature onset of the labor. So this is the polyhydramnios. So this was all about the amnion. So all these will be asked as a short note for you all, either 5 marks or 3 marks, and all are very important. That is amnion, yolk sac, umbilical cord, all these are very important. So please read them. Don't forget to read it, because you may miss sometimes thinking these are not important, but they are very frequently asked as short notes for you all. Okay. So next, coming to the yolk sac. So what is yolk sac? Can anyone tell? Hello? What is yolk sac? Can anyone tell what is yolk sac? Are you all there listening? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
So what is yolk sac? Already this is over amniotic cavity, yolk sac. So can anyone tell what is yolk sac? Don't know? So what is, so this is what you have seen in the early development. So you have got the amniotic cavity and the yolk sac. So you have got the blastocyst, which will be differentiating into inner cell mass and the outer cell mass. Later numerous cavities will appear within that, and so there will be formation of the bilaminar germ disc, which will be separated by two cavities. One is called as the amniotic cavity and the other one is the yolk sac. So what is this yolk sac? So yolk sac is a endodermal sac or a pouch which is lying ventral to the embryonic disc. So this is the embryonic disc. So this is the endoderm, because it is all lined by the endoderm only. So it is the endodermal sac which is lying ventral to the embryonic disc. So that is called as the yolk sac. So from where it develops? So it develops from the blastocystic cavity. So this will be the blastocyst, which will be differentiated to inner cell mass and the outer cell mass. So whatever that blastocystic cavity is there, so that will persist as the yolk sac. But this yolk sac will undergo changes. It will develop into three stages. One is according to the period of development. So one is primary yolk sac, the secondary yolk sac, and the tertiary yolk sac. So which is primary, which is secondary, which is tertiary? So you all should know. So the primary yolk sac. So primary yolk sac is the cavity of the blastocyst which is converted into the primary yolk sac when the endodermal cells which are lining the along the bilaminar germ discs. So they will multiply and form a flat cellular lining of the blastocyst cavity, which is called as the Users membrane. So this is the, so this hypoplast, which is a part of the bilaminar germ disc or the endodermal cells, they will multiply and form a flat cells around this blastocystic cavity. So these flat cells are called as the Users membrane. So this membrane, some tell that it is derived from the endoderm, and some tell it is due to the delamination of the surrounding trophoblast. So but most probably it will be derived from the endoderm. So now this cavity is called as the primary yolk sac. So that is primary yolk sac. So that is called as the primary yolk sac. So what will be the secondary yolk sac? So with the formation of the extraembryonic coelom, so whatever the surrounding extraembryonic mesoderm is there, so in that numerous lacunar spaces will appear. So that will be converted into cavity which is called as the extraembryonic coelom. So with the formation of this, what happens, extraembryonic coelom, the part of the yolk sac will be pinched off, and whatever the reduced yolk sac is there, so that is called as the secondary yolk sac, and here the cells will become cuboidal. So this is the extraembryonic mesoderm, what you are seeing. So this is the trophoblast. So this is the syncytial trophoblast. So what you are seeing, so this is all the chorion, which is forming the chorionic villi, you can see here. So this is the extraembryonic coelom. So this is all the extraembryonic coelom. So with the formation of the extraembryonic coelom, what happens? This part of the yolk sac will be reduced and pinched off. That yolk sac will be called as the secondary yolk sac. So this is with the secondary yolk sac, and this will be lined by a new wave of cells which are mainly the cuboidal. So this is the secondary yolk sac. Then what is tertiary yolk sac? Tertiary yolk sac means most of the yolk sac is absorbed by the fetus for the formation of the gut. That part of the yolk sac which is not taken up by the embryo and which is persisting outside, that is called as the tertiary yolk sac. So that is called as the tertiary yolk sac. So the part of the yolk sac which is not taken up inside the body of the embryo is termed as the definitive yolk sac or the tertiary yolk sac. And this tertiary yolk sac, it will communicate with the midgut via the vitello-intestinal duct. So this is the yolk sac, you can see it is pinched off. So this will be called as the tertiary yolk sac or the definitive yolk sac, which is not taken up by the embryo. So remaining part of the yolk sac will be taken up by the embryo for the formation of the gut. So that is the definitive or the tertiary yolk sac. So these are the three types of the yolk sac. The first which will be formed will be called as the primary yolk sac. With the formation of the extraembryonic coelom, it will be called as the secondary because it will be reduced in size. And the third one, which will, most of this yolk sac will be taken up by the embryo for the formation of the gut. The part which is not taken is called as the tertiary yolk sac or the definitive yolk sac. So then what will be the functions attributed to the yolk sac? So mainly it is in the hematopoiesis, okay, then the transfer of the nutrients, and it is helping in the formation of the gut actually. Then the trachea and the lungs, the lining epithelium of this will be derived from the endoderm of the yolk sac. And the most important thing is the primordial germ cells. The primordial germ cells, so you have heard of it in the spermatogenesis and the oogenesis. So these are derived from the dorsal wall of the yolk sac, and they will be migrating to the developing gonad, and they will be converted to the primary oogonia. So whatever the primordial germ cells are there, so from where they are derived? They are derived from the dorsal wall of the yolk sac. So these are the functions which are attributed to the yolk sac. So what is yolk sac, and what are the three types of the yolk sac, and what are the functions of the yolk sac? So usually a 5-mark question. So this will be asked, that is the yolk sac. So this was the other extraembryonic membrane or the fetal membrane. Then the next one is something called as the allantois or the allantoenteric diverticulum. Although this is allantois is mostly rudimentary in human beings, in other mammals it is subserving as a function as a reservoir of the urine. In humans it is usually rudimentary. So that is something called as the allantois. So this is the allantois. So this is from where it is derived. So it is a diverticulum which is arising from the caudal wall of the yolk sac. So this is the yolk sac. So from the caudal wall of the yolk sac, you have one pocket which is called as the allantois. So this allantois or the allantoenteric diverticulum will appear around the 16th day of the development, and where it will extend? It will extend into the connecting stalk. So this is the connecting stalk which will in future form the umbilical cord. So that is the connecting stalk. So it will extend into the connecting stalk. So once there is folding of the embryo, what happens? This allantois is connected to the dilated terminal part of the hind gut, which is called as the cloaca. So this allantois will give, the intraembryonic part will give rise to a vesicourethral canal and the urethus, and whatever the extraembryonic part is there, it will mostly disappear and it will remain as the median umbilical ligament. So this is what I have told here. So allantois is a small diverticulum which is arising from the caudal wall of the yolk sac on the 16th day, and it is extending into the connecting stalk. So what happens? So it will be mainly the intraembryonic part will give rise to the vesicourethral canal and the urethus, and whatever the extraembryonic part will be there, it will remain as the median umbilical ligament. So this allantois is traversed by the allantoic, so it is present in the connecting stalk, or it is extending into the connecting stalk. So what happens? It will be traversed by the, or it is vascularized by the allantoic vessels, which will be later converted into the umbilical vessels, that is the umbilical artery and the veins. So this will be traversed by the allantoic vessels. So this is the allantois, so diverticulum. This is the connecting stalk. Okay. So this is the diverticulum from the caudal wall of the yolk sac extending into the connecting stalk. So that is something the allantois or the allantoenteric diverticulum. So these are the some extraembryonic membranes or the fetal membranes. The next important one is something called as the umbilical cord. So what is umbilical cord? Can anyone tell what is umbilical cord? What is umbilical cord? So umbilical cord development was asked last year in not in our exams, in the RHS exam. The development of the umbilical cord was asked. So it is like a bouncer for UGs. So please don't ignore it. So umbilical cord, so it's another extraembryonic membrane or a fetal membrane. So it is initially called as the connecting stalk. So whatever the connecting stalk is there, that will only develop into the umbilical cord. So what is this umbilical cord? It is a twisted tubular cord-like structure which is enveloped by the glistening amniotic membrane. So just now I have described whatever the amniotic sac is there, it enlarges and it encloses the embryo as well as the connecting stalk. So this connecting stalk itself will form the umbilical cord. So it is a twisted tubular cord-like structure enveloped by the glistening amniotic membrane. So in this, blood vessels will develop. Normally there are two arteries and one vein. The length of which is around, average is around 55 centimeters. So when it is abnormally long, it will lead to the prolapse of the cord from the uterus, and it may encircle around the the neck of the fetus, leading to its strangulation and ultimately leading to hypoxia of the fetus. So that is when the cord is abnormally long. When it is abnormally short, what happens? It may lead to the premature separation of the membranes, and that is something you have to know about the abnormally long and the short cords. So what are the attachments of the umbilical cord? Can anyone tell from where to where it extends? What are the attachments? The other one end where it is attached?
To the umbilical of the baby.
Fetus, and the other end is attached to the
Placenta.
yes, the fetal surface of the placenta. So at full term, the one end is attached to the center of the anterior abdominal wall, particularly the umbilicus of the fetus, and the other end is fixed to the center of the fetal surface of the placenta. So it is mainly acting as a connecting link between the fetus and the mother, helping in the transmission of the nutrients. So that is the main function of this umbilical cord. So what is basically it is made up of? So we have told it is basically made up of the primary mesoderm of the connecting stalk. So that is the extraembryonic mesoderm. So that will form the mainly the framework or the basic structure of this umbilical cord is made up of the primary mesoderm. So how it develops? So it develops from the connecting stalk. So this connecting stalk, so it will be initially, so this is the connecting stalk. So in the initial periods of development, so in the other figures I have shown. So this is the connecting stalk. So this is all the extraembryonic mesoderm. So this will be the connecting stalk. So connecting stalk is that part of the extraembryonic mesoderm where the extraembryonic coelom is not present. So that is called as the connecting stalk. So this connecting stalk will be attached at one end to the roof of the amniotic cavity and at the other end to the trophoblast. So this is the trophoblast. So one end will be attached to the amniotic cavity and the other end to the trophoblast. What happens? During the process of development, what happens? It will gradually narrow and it will reach the caudal end of the embryo. Then later what happens? Due to the tail folding or the tail fold of the embryo, it will reach onto the ventral surface. It will reach onto the ventral surface of the embryo, and it will be attached to the chorion. It will be attached to the chorion and to the umbilicus. So this connecting stalk will be traversed by the umbilical vessels. So this umbilical cord contains the umbilical vessels, that is the two arteries and the veins. So it is mainly developing from the connecting stalk. So what is connecting stalk? It is that part of the extraembryonic mesoderm where the extraembryonic coelom is not present. So where it is attached at one end to the amniotic cavity and at the other end to the trophoblast. So later what happens? It will be shifted. First it will reach caudally, then again it will reach ventrally due to the tail fold of the embryo. So whatever the vessels there are present, they will form the umbilical vessel. So this is how the umbilical cord will develop. So that is the development of the umbilical cord from the connecting stalk. So this is the connecting stalk. So you can see this is the umbilical vessels which are present in the umbilical cord. So what it contains? Two umbilical arteries and one umbilical vein. So which umbilical vein will be present, right or left? It is the mainly the left umbilical vein. Right umbilical vein will disappear. Okay. So left is left out. So left umbilical vein and two umbilical arteries will be present. Then what happens with the formation of the umbilical cord? Whatever the primary mesoderm is present there, that will undergo mucoid degeneration and form a substance which is called as the Wharton's jelly. So this is nothing. This is called as the Wharton's jelly. So that is, you have already heard of this in the mucoid connective tissue. So whatever the extraembryonic mesoderm is there, that will undergo degeneration, mucoid degeneration, and form something called as the Wharton's jelly. Then what we have told, the allantoid diverticulum, it will extend into the yolk sac, into the connecting stalk. So that is the remains of the allantoid diverticulum may present, and sometimes remains of the vitellointestinal duct will be also present in the umbilical cord. So these are all the contents of the umbilical cord. Two umbilical arteries, one umbilical vein, Wharton jelly, then remains of the allantoid diverticulum and remains of the vitellointestinal duct. So what happens? The right umbilical vein disappears. So what does, you all know already, I need not tell. So the umbilical artery will carry the deoxygenated blood from the internal iliac arteries of the fetus to the placenta, and the left umbilical vein will convey the oxygenated blood from the placenta to the fetus. So this will usually, the left umbilical vein joins the left branch of the portal vein that conveys the blood to the inferior vena cava by the ductus venosus. So this will be dealt in details again in later when they are discussing about the veins. So just remember, the right umbilical vein will disappear. Only the left umbilical vein remaining, and the difference here is vein will be carrying the oxygenated blood and the artery will be carrying the deoxygenated blood. So there is no difference in the vessels of this umbilical cord, that is arteries will be thick only and veins will be just like the structure of the vein. So this is how you see the structure when you take a structure of the umbilical cord, two umbilical arteries, one umbilical vein, the vitellointestinal duct, whatever this is there, that is the extraembryonic mesoderm which has undergone degeneration, that is called as the Wharton's jelly. So why it is twisted? So usually it is twisted because the length of the umbilical cord and the umbilical veins is varying. The veins are more longer compared to the umbilical cord. That's why you will be seeing twisting and knots in the umbilical cord, and sometimes there will be true knots also which will be seen. So twisting and false knots will be seen because of the disparity in the length of the umbilical cord and the vessels. So, and you have also got the true knots. So this is how, this is the umbilical cord you are seeing, which will be covered by the amniotic membrane, and it has got the umbilical vessels, the Wharton's jelly, whatever I discussed now. So this will be the one attachment of the umbilical cord to the fetal surface of the placenta. So these are the all the extraembryonic membranes which you all need to know. That is, the first we have discussed is the placenta. There only I have covered about the chorion, then the amnion, the yolk sac, the allantois, and then you have got the umbilical cord. So all these are the extraembryonic membranes or the fetal membranes. So next we will be discussing about the twinning. So what is twinning? What do you mean by twins or twinning? Anyone knows what is twinning? And how many types are there and which one is common?
Two types.
Two types. Which are those? Which are those?
Dizygotic, monozygotic.
Yes, yes. So what do you mean by twinning or multiple pregnancy when more than one fetus is nurtured in a single pregnancy? So that is called as twinning, or multiple pregnancy. More than two, that will be called as the multiple pregnancy. If two are there, then it is called as the twinning. So more than two or more than one fetus being nurtured, that is called as the multiple pregnancy in a single pregnancy itself. So this multiple pregnancy or twinning is mainly because of hereditary reasons. Hereditary is the most common factor which is playing a role in the multiple pregnancy or twinning, and in other mammals and all it is common, but in human beings, since we are mono-ovulatory, that is only one ovum is discharged in the single ovarian cycle, so twinning is not common in the human beings, whereas in others twinning is common because they are polyovulatory. More than one ovum will be discharged, which will be fertilized, leading to multiple births. So it is sporadic and accidental in the human beings. So there are two types of multiple pregnancy. One is called as the dizygotic and the other one is called as the monozygotic. The dizygotic being most common. So it is the incidence is around 7 to 11, around 10,000 births. So it forms the 2/3 of the multiple pregnancies. So what is the reason for the dizygotic gestation or dizygotic twins? When two ova are discharged in a same ovarian cycle, and it will be fertilized by two different sperms. So that will be leading to the dizygotic twinning. So what happens here? Two zygotes will be formed, which will be separated, separately implanted into the uterine wall, and they will be separately covered by the chorionic sac and then the amniotic sac, and they have got a separate placenta. So this is called as the dizygotic twinning. Since they are fertilized by two sperms, they are not resembling each other, they are fraternal. They resemble like other siblings, and they don't resemble each other because they are fertilized by two different sperms. Hence, there will be the genetic constitution is also completely different. They are not identical. So that is the features of the dizygotic twinning. So each will be having their own placenta, amnion, chorionic sac, and they implant individuals. You can see here the two zygotes are formed here because two ova are fertilized in a same cycle by two different sperms. So two zygotes, they will be separately implanted into the uterine cavity. Since they are separately implanted, what happens? They have got a separate amniotic sac and the chorionic sac and a separate the placenta. So everything is separate here. That's why they are not identical, non-identical, or the they are called as the fraternal twins. So this is something called as the dizygotic twin. If the placenta, they come very close to each other, they will fuse with each other. So that may, one thing may happen here. The placenta, if they are lying very close, they may fuse. So this will lead to something called as the erythrocyte mosaicism. What is this? The erythrocytes of both the siblings are totally different. So that is called as the erythrocyte mosaicism. So it is something seen in the dizygotic twins. So in dizygotic twins, what happens? Two zygotes are formed. So implanted separately into the uterine cavities. Everything is separate here. That's why they are called as the dizygotic twins. And this is the most common twinning what is seen. Okay. So this is how it is seen here. So two separate zygotes. Okay. So here they have shown only the fusion of the placenta and the chorion. Okay. So this is about the dizygotic twinning. Then you have got something called as the monozygotic twinning. So what is this monozygotic? So here only the single ovum will be fertilized here. The defect is lying in the other stages, during the early stages of development. So here single ovum is fertilized by single sperm. So what happens? These twins are identical. They are having same genetic composition, and it depends. They may have the fetal membranes may differ. That is, it may be either bichorionic, biamniotic. So that may differ. But as such, the genetic constitution will remain the same because they are fertilized by a single sperm. Okay. So that is called as the monozygotic twinning, and it is very less common. It forms 1/3 of the twinning. Okay. So what will be the defects? So one will be during the blastocyst stage itself, there may be a defect, or it may be at the 2-cell stage, or a completely separate organizing center may appear, which may lead to formation of two completely different zygotes. So three hypotheses are suggest for this monozygotic twinning. One is splitting of the ovum at the different stages of development as earliest as the 12th stage, 2-cell stage. The other thing is early splitting of the inner cell mass, and the next common is the completely different organizing center may appear. So all these factors will lead to something called as the twinning. So here it is at the early blastocyst stage. So what happens? So here the inner cell mass will split within the same blastocystic cavity. So it will split into two, and it will be separately implanted into the uterine cavity. But this will be having because they are having the common blastocyst cavity, they have a common placenta and the chorionic cavity, but a separate amniotic cavity. So they are called as the biamniotic and monozygotic. They are called as the monozygotic and biamniotic. So this is at the early blastocyst stage, when the inner cell mass will completely split into two within the same blastocyst cavity. That is, it will be covered by a same zona pellucida. Later, when the zona pellucida will disappear, they will be implanted into the uterine cavity. So that is at the early blastocyst stage. Then the other one is at the bilaminar germ disc stage. So here what happens? In the primitive streak, there will be two different organizing centers will appear. So what happens? Two different zygotes will be developing because the cells are totipotent. What happens? Two separate zygote will be formed. So they are covered by a common placenta, amnion, chorionic cavity. So such factor is called as the monochorionic and monoamniotic, which is commonly leading to the conjoined twins. So conjoined twins is commonly seen in this common complication. What is seen in the monochorionic, monoamniotic twins is conjoined twins, because they are not able to separate. Their organizing centers are different. So two separate embryos will be developing, but they are not separating. So if they are not separating, that they will lead to something called as the conjoined twins. So this is something called as the monochorionic monoamniotic, which is mainly leading to this conjoined twins. So this is, so what you are seeing, so this is two inner cell mass will be developing. So this is at 2 cell stage, 3 there is, so this is early splitting of the inner cell mass. So it will be separately implanted into the uterine cavity. Here what happens, they will be common within the same chorionic cavity, they will develop and they are separately implanted. So that is one factor. The other thing is it is in the bilaminar germ disc, if separate organizing center will appear. So this will lead to formation of the two embryos, but within the common chorionic sac and the amniotic sac. So this is called as the monochorionic and monoamniotic. So you can see it is some complete same only. So here this is separate here, this is like the dizygotic. So this is called as the monozygotic and dichorionic. Again this is diamniotic and monochorionic. So only common placenta is seen here. So this is monochorionic and diamniotic. So these are the three types of the monozygotic twins. So one is like monozygotic and the dichorionic. The other one is the monochorionic diamniotic. The other one is the monochorionic and the monoamniotic, where one amniotic cavity and one your chorionic sac will be seen. So this is all the factors which is leading to the monozygotic twins. So it is, a defect is lying at either at the blastocyst stage or at the inner cell mass stage, or appearance of a separate organizing center in the notochord or in the primitive streak, leading to a complete formation of two different zygotes. So that is called as the monozygotic twins. So what we have told, most commonly we see is the conjoined twins in the monochorionic monoamniotic. So this is all same thing what we have told. So this is the monochorionic monoamniotic, where you can see either separate twins or the conjoined twins, okay, or the parasitic twins. So these are the complications what are seen in the monochorionic and monoamniotic variety of the twins. So they may be separate or they may be fused. If the embryos fuse, they are called as the conjoined twins, or sometimes one fetus will grow on the other fetus like a parasite, that is called as the parasitic twins. So you should know something about, you might have seen already this, that is the Siamese twins or the conjoined twins. When there is incomplete separation, so that is called as the conjoined twins. So where they will be fixed, so depending upon that they have given different names like craniophagus, the thoracophagus and the pyophagus. So what is this? Cranio means when they are joined at the cranial end, at the head end, that is called as the craniophagus. Then the pyophagus at the sacral region, and the thoracophagus is at the thoracic region. So there are many varieties which will be seen. So most commonly is this cranio, the pyo and the thoracophagus, which are most commonly seen. Then something called as the parasitic twin. So what is this parasitic twin? Sometimes there is less blood flow to the other twin. So what happens? The twin which is receiving the less blood will grow on the other twin which is receiving more blood. It will grow like a parasite, receiving the nutrition from that. So that is called as the parasitic twin. Sometimes this parasitic twin may be completely hidden within the other twin. So this is something called as the fetus in feto, when this twin itself is present within the other fetus. So that is called as the fetus in feto. So these are the common complications, that is the conjoined twins and the parasitic twin and fetus in feto, which is noted in the monochorionic monoamniotic variety of the monozygotic twins. Then something called as the superfecundation and superfetation. This is not a phenomena seen in the human beings. So what is this superfecundation? When it is usually seen in the polyovulatory animals, where multiple ovum are discharged, and these ovum will be separately fertilized by different male partners. So which is an uncommon thing in the human beings. So such thing is called as the superfecundation. And there is something called as superfetation. What is the superfetation? So here what happens, usually the ovulation is suspended in the pregnancy. Sometimes due to aberrant ovulation, that ovum also may get fertilized, leading to something called as a superfetation. But this fetus will be of the fetus will be of the different gestational ages. So that is called as the superfetation. Okay, so this is about the twinning. So dizygotic and monozygotic. Monozygotic again 3 types. That is the monozygotic and the bichorionic, then monochorionic, biamniotic, then monochorionic and monoamniotic. So these are the different types of the monozygotic twins. So monozygotic and dizygotic twins. Something called as the twin-twin transfusion syndrome. So what is this twin-twin transfusion syndrome? So this is shunting of the arterial blood from one fetus to the venous circulation of the other. So what happens? So here the donor is small, pale, anemic, while the recipient is large and polycythemic. So this is called as the twin-twin transfusion syndrome. Okay, so this is all about the twinning. So this was about the fetal membranes and the twinning. So both of these will be commonly asked as a short note for you all. Okay, and the amniotic this one. Amniocentesis you have to know. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this was about the fetal membranes and the twinning. Thank you. Have a nice day and stay safe.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So one thing what I want you all to read is about the chorionic villus biopsy. So chorion had discussed in the last class. So just read about the chorionic villus biopsy. Is it clear? So read about the chorionic villus biopsy. Everyone, assignment for you all. Is it clear? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.